We're here talking about our voter approval tax rate election, and I want to just make sure and share some information with you. So first I want to start off by talking to you about the challenge. Like, what are we up against and what's the problem we're trying to solve? And for me, it's going to be pointing this clicker. All right, we are having a difficult time recruiting and retaining staff. And there are several reasons for that, okay? First of all, we're seeing more educators leave the profession than what we're accustomed to see leave. They're retiring earlier. The days of the 40-year teacher are drawing to a close. They're retiring earlier, or they're leaving the profession for jobs outside of education. There are other jobs that they can do that provide them some of the same flexibility and benefits of education, and they can make more money doing it. There's a big shift in the way people did work during COVID. And for most of the people, they've sort of gone back to work and gone back to offices, but there's still a lot of remote work, and that has been very attractive to people who might have otherwise been attracted to education. The second thing that's really hurting us is that we are seeing fewer and fewer people who actually choose education as a major in college. So pre-COVID, we were seeing about 22% of the young people who go to college, and this is a national statistic, not a Texas one. But nationwide, we were seeing about 22% of young people select education as a major. That number's down to 4%, okay? So what we have is equal, if not greater demand for educators. We still need teachers, like they're leaving, so we've got lots of vacancies, and fewer people who want to take those positions. And so what that's doing is it's driving the compensation levels up as we're all competing for talent. This has been made even more difficult by the influences of inflation. I will tell you very candidly that historically Midway has not been the highest paying in the area. There are a lot of advantages to working in Midway, and some of those advantages have nothing to do with money, and people have wanted to come work for us. But with gas as expensive as it is, rent's gone up, the price of eggs, the price of bread, the price of whatever, it's something different every week. I saw something the other day that said we're going to start losing bleach cleaning wipes again, and I don't remember why. But so as those prices go up on everyday products, teachers are selecting more and more often for the higher compensation than they are necessarily for some of the advantages that there are associated with being Midway in particular. And then although we have increase in overall property value, the impact of that property value has a negligible impact on how we're funded per student. And I'm going to talk more about that in a few minutes. There are two basic buckets of money that we use to take care of our schools. One's interest and sinking, the other one's M&O, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Increased property values do help us on the INS side, and we actually have some INS strength, but they do very little, if anything, for us on the M&O side. We get basically a set amount of money per pupil unless we do something to our tax rate to help increase the amount of revenue we get. So here's some data, and I'm going to sort of point at this one up here, but you can see our trend line with the percentage of new teachers that we're bringing in every year. Now, I want you to notice the 22-23 year. That number is an anomaly. That's the year that we opened Park Hill Elementary School and did the middle school reconfiguration. So we had to hire more in that year because of that's not market, that's an adjustment the district made. So I want to be real upfront about that. But you can see our trend line. We added 137 new teachers and counting, frankly. We're still not completely staffed. And we're still trying to find people who can come in and fill positions in the district. And so that's how we've been going. If we were adding new teachers only due to enrollment growth, like some of those new teachers, again, would have nothing to do with turnover. It's got to do with the fact that because we are a growing district, we are adding students. That'd be somewhere between 20 and 30, all right? And that same number would be about true for the rest of these. We've added about the same number of kids, roughly, for the last 4 or 5 years. Here's another graphic that's interesting. So this line right here with the M's on either side represents our pay scale. So here's Midway, and here's a 0-year teacher. And right here, we're being outpaid by one district pretty significantly. But then when we get to this 5 to 8 year range, we start to lose in the compensation market to some of our other surrounding districts. I want you to look at the name of those districts because we'll look at those a little closer in a few minutes, those top 3, and I'll show you some reasons why they're able to pay their teachers more than what we're currently able to do. So part of our challenge is our teachers get to right about here and they see opportunities to get more compensation, and they start to make decisions about where they want to work. And so we get them in and we get them pretty trained up, and then they start to leave us. And so we're working hard on closing this gap, but we need to work on this piece as well. So I told you I was going to talk to you about the way we fund schools here in just a minute, and I will tell you on the front end, this is an oversimplification. If you were to study this deeply, you'd find out there's way more to it than what I'm getting ready to explain. But in simple terms, we have interest and sinking. That's the INS portion of our budget. That pays for our bonded indebtedness. When we sell school bonds, what we're essentially doing is putting ourselves into debt. Okay, think of it like the mortgage on your home. And then we have a tax rate that pays off that mortgage, right? So when you pay your property taxes, it's your value times a number. Part of that number is INS, okay? The other part of that money is from the M&O bucket of money, maintenance and operations. This is the bucket of money we use to pay teachers and for other reoccurring costs like electricity, fuel, and insurance, things such as that. It is illegal for us to use money from this bucket to pay for these types of expenses. One of the questions I'm asked often is, how can you afford to build new buildings but you can't pay teachers? And the reason is, I'm not allowed to use tax money gleaned from this bucket to pay for these expenses. And when we talk about the increase in property values, that fills this bucket pretty good, but it has almost no impact on this bucket. All right? And so what I'm going to explain to you in a few minutes is some work we've done to try and take the strength we have here to create an opportunity for taxpayers to look at an opportunity to add strength on this side. All right? Okay. So, what is our proposed solution? What is on the VATRE? How would this help solve the problem? So, what we're discussing is a 3-penny increase to the M&O side of that tax rate. So whatever it is that we're paying, we're talking about going up 3 pennies. That would glean $3.75 million a year for the district starting this year, like starting right now. We have the election November 7. And if the VATRE passes, that $3.75 million hits this budget. Okay? That is what we call golden pennies. And here's what that means. You might be aware of the state's Robin Hood plan, where they take certain money from districts that are property wealthy and give it to districts that are property poor. The dollars that come from golden pennies stay in Midway, no matter what. Oh, unless the ledge changes the rules. But current set of rules, no matter what, the money from these 3 pennies stays here. And that $3.75 million is a reoccurring deal. We'd get it this year and we'd get it the year after. And in fact, if the ledge does what it's typically done, they'll increase that amount over time. It's not a dramatic increase, but they'll add to that. It requires voter approval. We don't get these 3 pennies unless the voters approve it. It would be used for teacher salaries, consumables, and consumables like things that we use every day, and security personnel. I will tell you right now, it'll be consumed almost 100% by teacher salaries and then personnel. When I say teacher salaries, let me be clear what I mean by this. All staff. I say teachers generically. We have bus drivers, custodians, we have maintenance workers, and then we hired some security personnel. And I'm going to rabbit trail for just a minute, but I want to talk about this for just a second. So they passed a piece of legislation this summer that requires us to have a person who's armed, an armed person on every campus to provide safety for our students. And then they gave us $182,000 of safety money. Well, to add those security personnel has cost us $360,000. Okay? So they didn't give us nearly as much. They gave us about half of what we need to execute the plan we've executed, and we need to find a way to keep that sustainable, to stay compliant with law, and to make sure that we're doing the things that the state expects us to do to keep our kids safe. Okay, so we're talking about a 3-penny increase, but the district has already supplied a 3-penny decrease on the INS bucket. So if you remember what I said, those property values help us on the INS side, and I talked about strengths and weaknesses. Well, because the district is doing well on the INS side, on August the 15th, the board voted to decrease the INS tax rate by 3 pennies. Okay? The desire being that our taxpayers would be able to realize the full benefit of the 18.5 cent compression that was put in place by the state of Texas. I know it's a lot of numbers, y'all. But this summer, the other thing that the legislature did is they passed legislation that decreased your M&O tax rate. They decreased that by 18.5 cents. And we wanted our taxpayers to realize that full compression. And so in doing, they went up 3 on one side and down 3 on the other. But this still requires voter approval. Now these 3 pennies, our taxpayers have them. And no matter what happens at the VATRE, those 3 pennies are coming off. That action has already been taken. But these 3 pennies don't come back to the M&O side unless voters approve it. The other thing that you'll see is that on the November 7 ballot, you have the opportunity to vote in a way that would increase the homestead exemption to $100,000. It's currently $40,000. And so that's more action our state took to bring property tax relief to our taxpayers. For the first time in my memory, we have a commercial cap. So they can't go over 20% on any single commercial property to try and create relief for some of our business owners. If you're a business owner in town and you own some business-associated property, then they've limited that. And then this has been in place for a little while, but I like to remind people of it. If you're 65 years old or older, or you know someone who's 65 years old or older, it's important for them to know that if you have filed for the exemption, once your taxes come down, they can't ever go back up, right? So if one were to think, well, they're going down 3 pennies here, but in 2 or 3 years, they're just going to go back up, and I'm on a fixed income, and that's not going to work for me. For people who are 65 years old or older, that goes down and it never comes back up. And there are other people who are eligible for that exemption, but the 65 plus is the largest group. And so if you want more information about that exemption, you can see Mr. Wesley Brooks, who's sitting in the back of the room, and he can talk to you about that a little bit. And if you know one who's 65 years old or older and they haven't filed for the exemption, they can do that at the MCAD, and we can even talk to you about how to do that. All right, so this is what I just told you, only kind of in different terminology. So in 2022, you're paying $1.12 in property taxes for the school district. That's your M&O and your INS together. That number is dropping to 0.93 with the approval of the VATRE. If the VATRE is approved, that would drop to 0.93. Now remember, you already have that 3 pennies on the INS side. That's already been given back. For our average homeowner, the amount you pay in property tax is going to decrease somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500 a year. Okay? And then if you're just curious, what does that 3 pennies really mean? Well, what that 3 pennies means for our property owners is about $7.50 a month on average. And so we can take that $7.50 a month, and that can turn into $3.75 million for the district. So here it is graphically. I'm a visual learner, can y'all tell? So here it is graphically. Doing really well here, so we went down by 3 pennies, and that's already done. There's a big green check box, right? And then the VATRE is about whether or not the taxpayers will let us go up by 3 pennies on this side. So what's the rationale for the solution? Like, what is it that would cause district leadership to think that this is not an unreasonable thing to talk about doing? Well, last year, and the dates are going to get a little confusing, okay, so stay with me, but last year, we spent less money out of the M&O budget per student of anyone in McClendon County. And people are always a little surprised by that because of the size of our budget. But y'all, we have 8,823 kids. And so if you take the amount of M&O budget we have that comes in the door, and you slice it by the number of students that we have in our district, we spend less money per kid than anybody in the county last year. This year's projection, if the VATRE passes, okay, this is if it passes, the projection would have us at the 2nd lowest in the county. The only district that would spend less per kid than us is China Spring. They tried to get a 6-penny VATRE last year, and they were not successful, and they've now tried to go to that 4-day week to see if that can help them attract teachers, okay? Let me give you some more data. In 2022, the M&O tax rate, just the M&O, was 0.85. No one was lower than us. A handful were as low as us, but no one was lower. Okay? If the VATRE passes, we would be at 0.70. Now, that does put a number of districts below us. But if you'll remember earlier, I said I'm going to reference these districts that are paying us. It's reasonable for you to ask, Why are other districts paying teachers more than us? And there's two answers for that. And one is they tax at higher levels. 6 pennies more there, 6 pennies more there, 7 pennies more there. The other thing is some of those districts have a lot of federal money still that we don't have. There's a lot of money that was doled out during COVID. It was called ESSER money. And some of these districts still have some of that ESSER money left over. Well, that money for us was gone a long time ago because we didn't get nearly as much of it. As a district that is 30% economically disadvantaged, we didn't get nearly as much of that money as some of our neighbors. And so they're still living off some of that federal money that we're weaned off of already. And in addition to that, they're taxing at a higher level. And this is assuming the VATRE passes. Are y'all with me so far? Okay. 2022, if you took our M&O tax rate and our INS tax rate and you put it together, there's your $1.12. We were in the bottom half of the county. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 districts below us in tax rate. If the VATRE passes, you'll be at 0.24 on INS, 0.7 on M&O, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On overall tax rate, even if the VATRE passes, if you look at us compared to our county, we will have actually compared more favorably than we did a year ago. I guess more favorably, like we're even lower on the chart. I'll put it that way. All right, I want to make sure I didn't skip a slide. Yeah. I like to show this slide because it's a testament to the leadership of the school district for a long time. I've been superintendent here for, I think, 8 months now. 8? Is that right, Tracy? For 8 months. And so I get to brag on the district unashamedly because I haven't been here long enough to take credit for anything. So I just get to do it, right? This is 20 years of tax rate history. And you'll notice there's been a steady decline right here. Some of this due to district decisions, like especially back here, when the cap was $1.50 and this district was still as low as this. A lot of this due to statewide tax compression. Like we have to be honest about who's doing the work, okay? But then if you look at the INS side, that has also been kept flat for a period of time. And in fact, and here's the real kicker, okay? In the last series of bonds, there are around $150 million that renovated this building, added the 8th grade wing at River Valley Middle School, built Park Hill Elementary School. That last one we did, the board actually lowered your INS rate by 1 penny when they were in the process of getting those bonds. And so this is not a tax and spend school district. This is not a tax and spend school board. This is a trying to do the best we can for kids while being sensitive to the needs of taxpayers leadership group. What have we done? What have we already done in addition to just coming and asking for money? Y'all, I have 2 teenage sons. They're both in college. And it's normal for them to pick up the phone and call me and say, hey, Dad, I need money for. And it's normal for me to say, well, tell me what you've done to try and solve this problem yourself, okay? And if they don't give me some pretty good answers, I say, well, go try that and then call me back. Well, I don't want to be like one of my teenage kids. What have we done to try and solve the problem ourselves? We know that teachers are leaving the profession for reasons other than money. Now, our internal polling as well as the statewide polling will tell you the #1 biggest reason they're leaving is compensation. But there's other things. Workload, student behaviors, issues with curriculum. There are things on their minds. And we have 5 big priorities. We've addressed 4 of the 5. We're working on compensation, but on that one we need your help. And so we did a lot. Some of you may have heard of CHAMPS or your student talking about that. That's a big behavior initiative in the district. Workload was addressed in our academic calendar this year. So 30% of our school weeks are 4-day weeks this year. It's more than we've ever had. Part of that was in response to some parents. Part of that was a response to try and help our teachers increase the quality of their work life. And so we've done a lot of little things to try and make this whole situation better. And there's a lot of this that we have a lot of decision-making and creative ways to think through. But the money is the challenge that we're kind of dealing with right now. We've already cut 16 positions worth of staff worth about $700,000. And honestly, that number is growing a little bit because every time someone resigns or every time we have a position open, we scrutinize that and make hard decisions about whether or not we really have to have that moving forward. Or we look and see if there's not ways we can adjust our structures to get all that work done, given some of the existing staff. We just received a financial audit that we shared with our school board on Tuesday night, and that is now on our website. And so I was having a real good conversation before we started this evening that went something like, well, I see how we compare to our local neighbors. How do we compare to other districts kind of like us, like 6A-ish and not unlike us? That's what the efficiency audit did. And you can go online and look at our website, which I'll show you how to get to here in just a minute, and it gives you all those comparisons. Average teacher salary for our comparison group versus us, average money spent per pupil, comparison group versus us, and you can see how all those comparisons shake out. What if the VATRE doesn't pass? Like, what's at stake? Well, if it doesn't pass, we'll be $5.5 million in debt for the M&O budget this year. And it'll be our third year in a row of deficit budget, okay? And if you run a household at all, you know that that's kind of unsustainable. It's okay to hit savings every now and then, but at some point, you got to get in line. You've either got to increase revenue or decrease expenses, and we're trying to do both. Well, what does $5.5 million really mean? 90 FTEs. FTE is administrator talk for teachers, full-time equivalent. It's 90 teachers worth of money. Am I telling you that if the VATRE fails that we're going to cut 90 teachers? No. But if the VATRE fails, I cannot see how we will be able to maintain all of the programs and all the staff that we currently have. We're going to have to come in line with our budget, okay? So I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. We are looking at additional expenditure cuts. We're doing that all the time. I was in a meeting at the beginning of the school year, and I just told folks we're clamping down on travel. We're trying not to clamp on student travel. We think it's important for our kids who play soccer and volleyball and baseball to be able to go to tournaments and go to things. We have kids who swim and water polo. We like the kids to be able to travel. But we've really put the clamp on adult travel. And although that sounds like a great idea, some of that travel is how our professionals get trained up on how to be better. But everybody's got to do belt tightening when you're in this situation, and that's what we're doing. And then we've also talked about ways to increase revenue. We've talked about ideas like advertising on buses, which we're not opposed to doing. It will not generate $5.5 million, but we're at least looking at some ideas. And then we've looked at ideas that we're not as excited to talk about. But I know of districts in Austin where for a student to participate in marching band, they pay $2,000 a year. I know of school districts in the state of Texas that if a kid wants to play football, they have to pay $300 to $500 a year. And we don't want to have to put our community in that position. Y'all, I know of districts that are charging kids to ride the bus, okay? And so would we do all of those things? You know, we've got some plan B scenarios in place, and we're trying to shuffle through those. I don't want anybody to think I'm threatening anything. I'm not saying if it fails, this will happen. I'm saying here's the range of things that are potential outcomes, okay? In case you can't tell, one of the biggest things I'm hoping you hear me try and get across is I'm not trying to cajole, convince, or scare anybody into voting a certain way, but I do want you to be informed. Because when you walk in the ballot box, it doesn't give you this context. And I'm just trying to make sure you have the context. All right, election details. So, this is what the ballot language will read like. It's very confusing. It will ask you if you want to ratify a tax rate of 0.93, which will result in a decrease of 3.96% to the M&O budget and a decrease of the overall M&O levy of $2 million, okay? That, in your mind, might think, I don't want that. That means less money for the schools. Not really. If you want to see the district get the 3.75, you vote for this. If you do not want the district to get the 3.75, you vote against it. Now, I just want you to know how that looks. That may look confusing, but what happens is when that 3 pennies goes in, the state funding, the amount of money the state gives us will increase by $3.75 million. That's where it comes from, okay? Because while they're compressing money on your current levy or on your current rate, if you add to the rate, they give you some more back. Does that make sense? I know it's confusing. All right. Election day is Tuesday, November the 7th. If you're not registered to vote, if you have an 18-year-old at home who's not registered to vote, if you've moved to town recently, like me, and you've not handled your business on getting registered to vote, I have voter registration cards with me tonight. Actually, Tracy does, but we have them with us tonight. And you need to know that you need to register by October 10th. Early voting starts October 23rd, so you can vote early. And then the election day itself is November 7th. On November 7th, there'll be the 40 county election centers, there'll be these election centers, plus the state has asked us if we can add another one on this side of town, and we've yet to get final confirmation from them, but we do expect for there to be a voting location at what we call our ITC. If you don't know where that building is, you know where Rosa's is. I know everybody knows where Rosa's is. If you go across the street from Panther Way and look for the big red M that says Midway, that's the ITC. And there's going to be a voting location right there. Okay, with that, I would like to take any questions that you might have about what I just tried to explain.